Hi, great to see you, and welcome to the summer series of the Healthy Mind Speaker Series. I'm Peter Neufeld, part of the HR team here at Maple Leaf Foods, and it's great to see you again. I hope your summer season is off to a great start. I have my summer/COVID hairstyle going right now, so I'm relaxed and really looking forward to this time that we can spend together today. Before I introduce the speaker, I'll just quickly let you know, remind you again of our format. So it's the same format that we've done in the past, where we're going to be hearing from a great speaker for about 15-20 minutes, and then we're going to be opening up to Q&A. And so if you have any questions, just click on the icon that you can see in the top right corner of your screen. I'll be monitoring the questions at the side, and we'll be trying to answer as many of those as we can. So with that, it is my absolute pleasure to introduce Marnie McBean. And so Marnie, when I was reading her bio, so it's just incredible. I'm sure many of you know her already, and because she is one of Canada's top decorated Olympians that we've ever had. She's also, though, Order of Canada, Sports Hall of Fame, 3 honorary doctorates, and then involved in multiple charities in terms of Right to Play and Because I'm a Girl initiative, just to name a couple. And Marnie's going to speak with us today on a topic that I think we'll all be able to relate to and that she has tremendous experience on. And it's about happiness and how to find happiness while performing at your absolute best under stressful conditions. And so before we jump into that, Marnie, you do a lot of talks. And when you hear yourself introduced and people talk about your achievements, what's kind of going on through your mind as you kind of hear that?
Peter, well, thank you for that introduction. And I'm always wondering, like, who is that? Who is that person? Like, how is that me? You know, one of the first things I always say to athletes when I'm like trying to encourage them to believe in themselves is it's like normal people who do incredible things. And sometimes I have a tough time thinking, you know, I grew up in Etobicoke. I kind of think of myself as a super normal kid. And then you say all these things about me. And I'm like, how is that possible? But then I did it. So I have to kind of live it and go from there. And, you know, I guess that's maybe why they selected me. The Canadian Olympic Committee selected me as the chef de mission for the Tokyo 2020, and they remain the Tokyo 2020 Olympic Games, even though they're going to be in 2021. So I was selected as the chef de mission for that. You know, Tokyo is going to be my 10th Olympic Games. Like, I remember walking into my first Olympic Games thinking, this is the bomb. Like, oh my gosh. And, you know, I went to 3 Olympics as an athlete. I went to 2 as media, and Tokyo was going to be my 5th Games going as a mentor. And so you talk about your COVID hair. I always look like a Muppet. Like when I'm a mentor, I often say that I'm like a mentor or a mascot, whatever the athletes need. And then people always ask me, like, what do you do when you're going as a mentor to the team? And I often describe myself kind of in that role as the captain of swagger, where my goal as a mentor to an Olympic team was to normalize the roller coaster of our emotions that come with all of our ambitions. And so, you know, I have that role as the chef de mission. I have that role. I'm also the chief ambassador and advocate. Sometimes I think I'm the queen, but I've been involved in a lot more decisions. Like, I think every chef has its issues, but I've been handled a doozy. You know, Peter, and everyone, I should actually say hi to the audience as well. And I want to thank everyone for your time and your presence in this call. You know, I thought when I was being selected as the chef de mission, like I had this solid range of experiences with respect to the Olympic environment, right? Like I went to my first Olympics and I won 2 gold medals. Like I won on a Saturday and I found inner peace and I figured out how to win again on a Sunday. And that's turns out to be pretty hard. And then I came back 4 years later and I won a gold medal at a successive Olympics. And it turns out that that's also really hard. And this goes back to that. How did I do that? Like this normal person doing these crazy things. Because continued success, I think we all know, is way more challenging than first success. First success is you're just chasing this target. You're like, the colloquial, the dog chasing a tire on a car, and it finally gets it, and it's like, whoa, what do I do? And the second time, you have this understanding of, catching the car comes with its own issues, and all the expectations. So continued success is hard. So I'm like, okay, I got this covered as a chef. I've got first success, continued success. I had to withdraw from one games because of injury. I've competed in times of scandal and tragedy. I have counseled athletes who've come back as champions. I've counseled athletes who've come back with their heart broken. I thought I had it covered, but for the pandemic, as we're all learning, there is no playbook on this, right? There's no playbook to a pandemic. And so it takes me back to what is my actual role as the chef and how I'm going to share and talk about being happy with you guys today. Because first of all, the first role as a chef is to keep our team united. And we have been since the beginning. It has not been difficult to keep the Canadian Olympic team united. In our first priority right now is community safety and lowering the curve of infection. So as I talk about ambitions and being happy, that is packaged with and alongside our prima facie duty right now of lowering the curve and wearing a mask and doing what we need to do in our communities to keep the infection rate low. But as a team leader, it remains my job to help the Canadian Olympic athletes. And that's not just the athletes, it's the coaches, it's the support staff. There's a huge, as much as we were going to have 400 athletes in Tokyo, we would also have about that many coaches and physios, massage therapists, mental performance coaches, nutritionists, that we have all the people who are doing the technology behind the sport. These also are important members of our team. It's not just the athletes who have their feet on the track or their hands on the oars. Our team, like your team, is right from the product to deciding what the product is going to be, how it's going to be made, how it's going to be marketed, how it's going to be sold. Everybody is the team. And so my job remains to make sure that our team believes in more. My job remains team building, and it's really challenging because I'm supposed to be going around North America, meeting all of our athletes, and I've had to do it, as we all have been, through Zoom and email and all the social DMing I've been doing, reminding that we are all in this as Team Canada. And I think one of the big roles that I've been trying to play is to help athletes remind that we are going to come through this. I don't believe in saying things like back to normal. We are going to be on new paths. We're not going back to old paths, but we're going to come through this. And when we come through this, I want to make sure that Team Canada has used this time to their advantage and that they haven't waited to be happy, right? Like when we come through this, whether it's going to be 100 days from now, 200 days from now, I don't know how many days we're going to come through and we're going to feel like the lights are going to come on, that Hollywood movie where it goes from black and white to it starts filling with color and the rainbows and the birds start coming out. What are we going to feel at that point in time? How are we going to look back on these days? And so how are we going to define our story? And I think that's one thing that everyone, if we get caught feeling like we're waiting to be ready, waiting to start, we're missing the fact that we're living it right now. All of our Olympic athletes, most of them have been on hold, as we all have for 100 days. If they've been waiting for their story to start, they've missed it. Because eventually we're going to be telling the story about how we came through it. And what is the story they're going to be telling? And lately, and it was really in concert with when you called me up and you asked me, you said that Maple Leaf was really working on, mental health and wanting to be happy. Like, how do we figure out happy through all this? I've been sharing this with the athletes, and a big part of this is looking back at the times that we've been at home, the times that we've had to commit to other things, and looking at it like, so what have I done? And I think a big part of, if you want to come out of this happy, if you want to come through this happy, we have to make sure we're trying to be happy today. And a big part of that as ambitious people is recognizing that as ambitious people, we always have these to-do lists, right? Like every one of us has a to-do list, whether it's, they're to-dos, they're given to us corporately, they're part of our family to-do list, our personal to-do list. We're going through life always with these to-do lists. And when we get them, you get to have that little check mark, check it off. But what do you do with it then, right? What happens to all those checked boxes? Well, you shouldn't garbage them. And particularly right now, you shouldn't garbage them. Those are your done list. And I think a big part of coming through this whole pandemic happy is having a really conscious awareness of our done list. And that done list is all those things that we've been doing. And I think the idea of ready is also got to change a little bit, because there is our big life ready, like the goals that we had a year ago. And there should be our COVID idea of ready and what we're doing now. So in our done list, our to-do list should have, we should have figured out by now how to maintain some of our long-term to-do lists. Like, what can we be doing for ourselves to better ourselves right now? But also, what are our pandemic to-do lists? What are those items? Whether it's gardening, or you're going to Marie Kondo your house, or you're going to figure out how to make sourdough bread. There's all these things that people have been doing. Some people are getting in way better shape than they've been in a long time. Some people have learned an instrument. And all these things should be on our done list now as they're coming through. And we should get this sense that as we're piling up and piling up and piling up these check marks, don't garbage them. Write them down somewhere. Write all the things that you've been doing while you've been home and bring this in. And it's going to help us realize that there is momentum to what we're doing. It's not the momentum we expected, but that sort of momentum is the momentum of our contentment. It's where, we're going to get that inertia of moving. The more little things that catch up to us, it's going to help us move through and realize that we can be happy. One of the other big things I think I'm communicating with the athletes, and I think is important for everyone to remember, is that you are the somebody who can be doing these things. You are the somebody who can be content. You are the somebody who can be happy. You are the somebody who can be successful and accomplish lots of stuff, right? At some points in my time, I referred to myself as the CEO of stuff. It's actually a good thing, right? The CEO of stuff. And that whole idea of being the somebody, I remember once when I was writing, so one of the ways I shared with you that I communicate with the athletes is by emails. And before the Vancouver Olympics, I was trying to figure out, kind of scratching my head, what should I write? I had a little bit of writer's block, and so I did some laundry. And in the laundry, I went down those stairs there, and I went to my laundry room, and I did the laundry, and it was clean. And then I came up, and then I took my clean laundry up those stairs there. I actually never get to do that when I'm talking to an audience in their home turf, but down there for laundry, up there with the clean laundry. But somewhere around here, I dropped a sock. And, because I hadn't folded the laundry yet, and I dropped a sock here, but I took the laundry upstairs. And as I went upstairs, I noticed that I dropped this sock, and I thought, oh, somebody will get it. And I came down, and I came into my kitchen, and I made a coffee, and then I went back to my office, and I passed the sock again. And I was like, somebody will get it. I started getting really, really stubborn. I started thinking, you know what, somebody's going to get that sock. And for 2 days, I walked past the sock that was right here. You can't miss it walking around my place. Coffee there, kitchen there, TV, bedroom up there. I walked past this sock a lot, and I was getting really, really stubborn. Now, it's important to know that I was living alone at the time. And I was doing it anyways. I was waiting for somebody. And I realized that's what I needed to write to the athletes. That's what I need to share with you. You are the somebody you're waiting for. Success, opportunity, luck, all those little done checklists, they're right at your feet. You just have to realize you are the somebody who you're waiting for. I think, the important thing to remember right now is we are still in a crisis, right? There's no getting around it. We're still in a crisis, but there's no reason that you can't feel good, you can't feel content, and you can't feel happy with how you're managing yourself, your time, and your family. And with respect to your days now, the path to our goals is being redrawn without question. There's no path that exists. And I was recently quoted as saying most of our paths are garbage. The plans that we had in January, they're pretty much garbage, but it doesn't mean that our goals are garbage. Our paths are being redrawn almost daily, but that's okay. As long as we realize that we're flexible, and in that flexibility, look at your done list and notice that you have momentum and you're doing stuff. It's not the stuff you thought you were going to be doing, but you're doing stuff, and find contentment in that, find happiness in that. And then look at yourself and realize that you are the somebody who can be happy. You are the somebody who can be successful. You can be like all of my Olympic athletes. And with the ambition that you have for whatever goals you have, I suggest you take swagger in them. You can have swagger right now, even in a pandemic. So let's get through this one day at a time. Happy.
That's so awesome. I love that idea, the captain of swagger. And I think there's a lot of swagger within Maple Leaf, and it's one of the things that we're a pretty proud and ambitious group, and it really fits. You must notice though, and I don't know if you're not. You're very positive and seem naturally resilient. And so I'd like to pause on that for a minute. And do you, has that come naturally to you, or has that been by training, in terms of training yourself to be more resilient? And before you answer, just a reminder, folks, if you have questions, please, again, use the icon and we'll be happy to answer them. So Marnie, thoughts on, are you a natural resilient person, or have you been working on it?
Well, definitely working on it. And to be fair, you asked me to talk about being happy today. And if the comment was like, fears and doubts, I could have gone on for just as long on fears and doubts. And I think that's, as a mentor, that's a big thing is sharing with the athletes that for sure. I haven't ever had a race where I haven't had fears and doubts, even in the race, before the race. I haven't ever had a season where I haven't broken down in tears. Sometimes on the water, broken down on tears, just bawling my eyes out, thinking, I can't do this. It's either too much or I'm really crappy. As a world and Olympic champion, the next year I'm bawling in the middle of the lake, thinking everything I've ever accomplished was a fluke, and how will I ever live up to it? So. A bit, I'm so glad you asked the question, because part of being happy is recognizing that you're not always happy, and not losing the plot. Like, I don't get to in the moment, it's not this huge reset button. Like, the moment that I have fear and doubt, I don't take that done list and go, well, I guess that's garbage. Got to start over again. Part of the done list is being okay with my fears and doubts, and recognizing that everything we do, I think, is volume control. I have fears and doubts even about this presentation. I have ambition for it to be good, and whether or not it's going to be good or not. So I always have this, this voice on my shoulder, and let's call it the volume is going up and down on how I'm doing. But then on the other side, I know to embrace that you're doing okay, right? And, you've done this before. You're generally, ever get bad reviews. So it's everything we do is volume control. And I think, I wrote a book, and the book is called The Power of More. But what I wanted to call it was the jammed cat philosophy of performance. And now I have to explain that to you. Yeah. And the jammed it's going to be, I'll try not to go too long. So a jam cat. Okay. So I was sitting there exhausted one day, and I was eating, just so exhausted after training, and I'm eating a bagel with jam on it. I drop it, and everybody knows it lands jam side down. And we have this discussion, why does it always land jam side down? And we're so tired that everything makes sense to us. Right. And so we're talking about this jam side down. And then someone was like, well, when you drop a cat, it always lands on its feet. So I was like, well, what would happen? What would happen if you put jam on the back of a cat? No cats were harmed. You put jam on the back of the cat and you drop the cat. It would never land, right? It would just go from the feet to the cat, to the feet to the jam, to the feet to the jam, to the feet to the jam. And when I first came up with this, I thought it was like I was solving the energy crisis. And then as I started mentoring, I realized that it's really that is the roller coaster of our ambition. Because as soon as we think we've accomplished something, we want more. As soon as
Yeah.
we achieve what we thought was perfect, we want more. And so the whole idea of volume control and the jammed cat is recognizing in everything we do, there's almost always two emotions. You can be really proud of the performance and really disappointed with the result. I know so many athletes who have a Canadian record at the Olympics, but they came fourth. Unfortunately, in Beijing, we had something like 17 fourth place finishes. And this is where it kind of clued into me. Many of them were personal best results. Those athletes should have been so happy, but they were gutted. And I couldn't say, oh, just be happy. That's a Canadian record. They were fourth at the Olympics, and that sucks, right? So I think that whole idea of resilience is, while I am happy, I might also be sad. And while I'm sad, I might also be happy. I don't try and box out my emotions and tell me that any one of my emotions is wrong. I kind of just invite it in and let it coexist with everything else.
I think that's excellent, and the idea of accepting the emotion and letting it coexist, and that they don't negate each other, is so important. One of the questions that came up, and I think you've already answered it. It said, "What do you recommend? How do high performers deal with self-doubt prior to an event?" Is that the idea of controlling the volume, or are there other things that you do that help people to kind of handle self-doubt?
Yeah, no, for sure. The first step is realizing that because you have doubt, because you have fear, you're not on the wrong path. Those fear and doubt actually show that you're on the right path, right? There is no courage without fear, and nobody, there's no joy in celebrating a mediocre goal, right? So hard goals are always way better. And the way to get away from self-doubts is they're there. And so where do you park your mind, right? So it's hard to just stop thinking about it. So, Christina Groves is one of our all-time best long track speed skaters. And we were having a conversation about this. And the way she articulated is she just breaks it down to a really small element of technique, something that she's been working on for a while. So she'll park her mind into something that her mind has been chewing on for a while, right? So for speed skaters, they keep at least one of their arms behind their back, right? Like, it's sort of awkward to do while I'm sitting here, and it's actually really hard for speed skaters to hold that arm. So what you see when they're exhausted, their arms are both flowing around. And so she uses the way to get around her self-doubt and her fears is she parks her mind into technique. And I think that's a really solid way of dealing with it. So first of all, don't beat yourself up for having it, and then put your mind into something that is way more constructive.
No, that's excellent. So there's a question here, and it's very work related, but I think you would have the insights that would be really applicable. During the pandemic, my team was diverted to risk mitigation and other activities related to COVID. It says now, several months later, we're going back to our regular day commitments, and we're behind. So it's stressful for the team. And this person says, as their coach, any ideas on how I helped the team kind of get climatized to the goals that they had before? So they switched, and now they're back to regular.
Well, I think, the goals that they had before remain, but the way they're going to achieve them is differently. And as a leader, you have to recognize that it's not like suddenly we're going to go from zero back to the same output that we had before. We have to figure out these new paths. We have to figure out how to do it in a safe environment, sometimes with fewer people or more restrictions. We have all the same things going on in our sporting environments. So this is something that we have been talking about also in sport, but I appreciate literally I appreciate the health concerns for making sure that your products come out with the 100% quality that they always have. So as a leader, you just have to be working to dial them up in a responsible way, and be prepared to just say, my team can do a lot, but they maybe that they're working up to it. Like I was in discussion with a message that we were going to put out from the Canadian Olympic team, and I can't really go into it, and so this might be a little cryptic. But we had to have voices in the room who were like, it's not time to have that message yet. We're not ready. We have to recognize where we're at in this pandemic. So in sport, we're back to training, but we're not back to competition. So while everybody, including your corporate environment, your work environment, is getting back to work, it's not back to normal. We are still very much in a pandemic. And we have to recognize it. As a leader, you can't bring everyone back and just say, right, we're game on, because there isn't a single game on the planet that is on as it was.
Yeah. And I think you were talking about recognizing the done list. And I think what I'm hearing within this question is the idea that they've accomplished other things. And so they might feel they're behind on their to-do list that they had before, but they've actually accomplished other things they never even knew they would be doing. So a question here on that, it says, what advice do you have on how to bring yourself back to being happy when you're having a bad day? And the person talks about how it can snowball. It can snowball once it's a bad day. And your statement is start happy, end happy. What do you do when you kind of have a bit of a messy middle?
It's kind of like the hiccups, right? You've got them, and then you never notice when they're gone, and you're like, I think I had the hiccups like last week. When did we exactly when you get the hiccups, so you would know exactly when you're sad, but you never really recognize that point where you're happy again. Be kind to yourself. When I'd be out on the lake having a terrible day, and the way I got through that was letting my teammates come by and tell me, like, this too shall pass kind of thing. But it's not like they said that to me and I was like, oh, okay, great. And happy doesn't always mean like big bright smiles. Happy sometimes just like I used the word content intentionally. But I think the idea is you have to be kind to yourself, and you have to take it one little bit at a time. And maybe it's going to be when you wake up. Maybe it's going to be in a couple of days. Everyone comes through all of these things differently, right? And try and do the things that make you happy. Like for me, it's sweat, laugh. I know these things are important to me. And sometimes they're really hard. Like, how do I make myself laugh, right? I know how I can make myself sweat. These days I just walk outside. But yeah, I think it's key to be kind to yourself, right? And don't expect it to suddenly, it's not binary, and it's not going to go off on. It'll be gradual, but you won't even notice that it's happening. So just try and collect all those little done things that you're doing to move your inertia, whether it's sleep, eating healthy, whether it's talking to someone, listening to a podcast, listening to music, anything that sort of, you don't even know it's bringing joy to your life, but the next thing you know, you're like, God, I was really sad 2 days ago. And one of the things I do with some athletes, when things are good, I have them journal that, like write about how you felt on a great day. And then you'll go back to your journal and when you're having a bad day, and you'll be like, God, I actually felt really good on the day. I can't believe wow, I have days like that. So sometimes if you're having a roller coaster through your emotions, when you're having a good day, write it down. And when you're having a bad day, you can write that down too, right? Try not to spiral yourself in to more, but sometimes it helps writing a letter to yourself. Explain to yourself why you're unhappy. And I used to do that, actually. I used to explain to myself why I was scared or unhappy. I would write letters to myself like I was completely unknowing. And then I would find that in explaining it to myself, I probably was not as unhappy as I thought. It's weird. I remember that one for a long time.
No, this is fantastic, and unfortunately, we're at the end of our time. But I would like to say, Marnie, it's so interesting for me in terms of your style as a leader is so approachable and vulnerable. And I think a lot of times people would have a view as you're the coach to all of the Olympic athletes. You know, you are working with the people of the highest performance. And many people, myself included, might have had a certain view of what it takes to kind of be that coach and the way that you need to be. And for some people, it might be the idea of being very directive and almost like what we would see, you know, in a movie. But what I'm hearing here, and you know, if I can be so bold, is the authenticity of how you bring your leadership to the table. And so I'd like to thank you so much. People have written in so many questions. We haven't gotten to nearly all of them. One here I'll just call out as we end: revelation moment, the CEO of stuff. So people like are loving these. This has just been really awesome, and thank you so much for the time. Thank you for your wisdom, and folks, thanks for joining in and being a part of this. We're going to continue to have some more summer series speakers, and we're reaching out to different people now. But if you know someone, we want to take advantage of your network, and if you have someone great, like we did introduce to Marnie today, please reach out as we're starting to fill our roster. So I wish you a great day, and thanks again, Marty, and goodbye.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.